Well, welcome to our next North Carolina Coaching Collaborative webinar. This one is called Matrix Moves, Coaching for Will and Skill, and I've been wanting to do this one for a while. It's based off of a book that I really like, and I learned a lot from. And so I'm going to be sharing some of the content, and then we'll be applying it to our work contexts. So let's go ahead and get started. I will share my screen, and we are off. All right, so you'll see at various points throughout the presentation that I have what I call a chat check-in. So that means that I'm anticipating responses in the chat from these little check-in activities. So it says some educators are just so much fun to coach. Describe characteristics of educators whom you really enjoy coaching. So go ahead and put those descriptions in the chat. No names, just characteristics. Enthusiastic, eager to learn something new. Absolutely. You can just see them get excited when there's a new idea or a new possibility, or they're recognized for trying something new. So that makes it super, super fun. You can probably predict what the next question is going to be. Some educators are, well, less fun to coach. So describe some characteristics of these educators. Again, no names, just characteristics. Oh, good word, disgruntled. Absolutely. Counting down to retirement. There's actually an example in here that might refer to that a little bit. Um, Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to be thinking about both of those educators and then all of the educators that lie somewhere in the middle of those two extremes as we go through this particular session. So the learning goals for the session are to classify teachers into quadrants of the will skill matrix using observable evidence of motivation and mastery. We're going to explore some coaching strategies that correspond to each quadrant so that we can help each teacher grow. And you will design an actionable plan to apply one of the matrix aligned coaching moves in an upcoming coaching cycle with someone that you are working with. So those are the goals for the next little less than an hour. As I said in the introduction, this session is based off of the work of Robyn Johnson. So primarily, I'm going to be referencing this book, the Stop Leading, Start Building book. And I actually love the subtitle even more than the title of the book. It is Turn Your School into a Success Story with the People and Resources that you already have. That is so important in this day and time. I remember when I graduated from college in upstate New York, there were hundreds of applicants for every position. I never got called for an interview. And so principals really could pick and choose their staff members and decide, what personality types, what skills they wanted or needed in their school, and really be picky about those things. And we don't always have the luxury of doing that anymore. We're happy to find the people who want to be a part of our school, and we welcome them in regardless of their will or skill. And then we coach them from that point on. And so This book really addresses that. The book is designed for instructional leaders. So a good part of the book is really speaking to the principal or assistant principal, but then there's also a section that very much refers to coaching. And so that is the section that we are really going to be working on. Now, you'll notice through the slides that on some of the slides, I actually reference some of Robyn's other works. And so this may just be someone that you want to look into if you're really interested in instructional leadership and maybe different takes on instructional leadership. So chat check-in, complete this sentence. Before a school year even begins, as a coach, I know I will have teachers who need support with, so fill in the blank. Absolutely. Classroom management, student engagement. And so my thought with this question is that we know, yes, technology, we know that teachers are going to have needs regardless of what new initiatives may be rolling out in a building. There are still some consistent areas that we just know we're going to have teachers that need some support in those areas. And so we can kind of proactively plan for those. We can't be surprised. So it can't be the middle of September and we're like, oh my goodness, I have a teacher with classroom management issues. Whatever am I going to do? This is something that you can just plan for and have some support, some materials, some resources already at the ready for those teachers. And this whole presentation is really going to be thinking about how you can proactively plan for the 4 types of teachers that we'll be examining through the Will Skill Matrix. So one of the things that Robyn Jackson promotes is this idea of a buildership model. So she says that if you have a school and you lead that school through a buildership model, then you have these 4 steps. You clarify your purpose, you grow your people, you chart your pathway, and you execute your plan. So on page 10 of her book, she specifically says, when you adopt this model, you'll gain clarity because everyone is going to get focused on doing the right work the right way. You'll have cohesion as everyone works together to achieve school goals. You'll have competence as everyone grows the will and skill they need to be successful. And you'll have increased confidence that together you will achieve your goals. So when you take these 4 components together, you create a kind of what she refers to as a self-correcting system that helps you not only turn your school into a success story, but it also helps you to sustain that success over time. So as we look at those 4 components, clarify your purpose, grow your people, chart your pathway, execute your plan, which component of this model represents the work of the coach? Yeah, so a coach is definitely going to be that person who your role is to grow the people. And so, as you can see, that's the second step in the buildership model. And it also is chapter 2 in Robyn's book that I'm referring to. And so, that's kind of an easy way to remember that. All right, so with the buildership model, Robyn Jackson actually compares different leadership models. And so she says there are bosses, there are leaders, and there are builders. So if you're an instructional leader who is a boss, you really focus on the tasks that are happening at the school. And so you work from the lens of what do we want to do? And so you are very much assigning tasks, monitoring tasks, holding people accountable for tasks. If you are a leader, then leaders focus on processes. And so they're working from the lens of where do we want to go and how can we create systematic processes to get to where we want to go. She really takes the perspective of being a builder. And so she says builders focus on value. And so they lead a school from the perspective of who are we as a community of educators, as a community of learners? Who are we? And what do we believe? So, what do we believe about teaching and learning? What do we believe about showing respect? What do we believe? And so that's the lens that they take for their leadership. And you can see that if you want to dig more into this buildership model, she does have a book that's called The Builder's Manual. And so that one is really, really taking a deep look at the buildership model. So when we look at masterful teachers in the buildership model, she says builders don't focus on the few members of the staff that are the problem. They focus on the many and get to work building everyone into a master teacher. It's okay. Is it okay to have a school of proficient teachers? A proficient teacher will understand and reach most students, but a master teacher reaches all students. And so this quote really spoke to me because as a coach, I know that it was really hard not to get totally absorbed by the teachers who are identified to be the problem in whatever context that may be. They tend to grab our attention. They tend to keep our attention. They tend to keep the leadership's attention, and they want our coaching focus to be on these specific teachers. But that can sometimes narrow or reduce our impact because there are so many other teachers who also have areas in which they need to grow. So, how might you define master teaching? And feel free to either share it in the chat or unmute. What do you think it means to be a master teacher? I see the typing bubbles going. All right, the ability to reach and engage all students on a high level of learning that challenges all students of different levels, and those students work toward those goals and expectations. Really good. I like how you've included both the teacher and the students in your definition. Very nice. And Suzanne, accomplished at leading in the classroom and having successful results, student growth, able to pivot, scaffold, and enrich. I really think that both of your definitions might be a little bit more inclusive than Robin Jackson's, but we won't tell her that right away. So her definition is a masterful teacher is one who helps every student grow academically and meet or exceed standards. And that was definitely a part of the definitions that you both shared. And this actually comes from her work that's called Never Underestimate Your Teachers. And I love that title for a book as well. So, as we consider her thoughts on masterful teachers, she says great instructional leadership means rejecting the idea of masterful teaching as a gift endowed to a select few. It means seeing masterful teaching for what it really is, a combination of skills and attitudes that can be learned and that can be taught. And so I just really love this perspective. And as a coach, it's something that I do need to be reminded of. Every teacher is not going to enter a school building being a master. And if you don't walk in the school building already being a master, it's okay. You still have so many opportunities to grow and develop into that master teacher. It's not something you're born with. It is definitely something that you can develop over time. And so I really like the grace that this quote brings. So in the book, she does give some examples of the difference between a proficient teacher and a master teacher. So here are a couple of the examples, and then she has other examples on page 47 of the book. But she says a proficient teacher, in a proficient teacher's classroom, there are going to be learning activities that are aligned with instructional outcomes and follow an organized progression that is suitable to a group of students. And so when you hear that, you're like, that's good. We want teachers who can do that. Yes. So our proficient teachers are going to have those skills. However, a master teacher would take that a little bit further. A master teacher has learning activities that follow a coherent sequence that is aligned with instructional goals designed to engage students in high-level cognitive activity. These are appropriately differentiated for individual learners. So you can see how we've built on the skill of the proficient teacher to become a master teacher who is truly helping every child in the classroom grow and succeed. Another example she provides is a proficient teacher conveys to students that he or she has other approaches to try when the students experience difficulty. A master teacher conveys to students that he or she is not going to consider a lesson to be finished until every student understands, and that teacher has a broad range of approaches to use. And so that speaks to me a little bit of kind of how we started with, hey, is there anything that your teachers are going to need at the start of a school year? Well, that master teacher is going to have that same lens going into instruction. I know I'm going to have some students who probably struggle with this or this component of a lesson. So I'm going to proactively already be prepared to address those needs. And I am not going to be satisfied until I have found a strategy to reach each of my learners. And so you can see how with these examples, and there are more examples in the book, we don't want our students to just have proficient teachers. That's a start, but we really know that every student deserves to have a master teacher. So as a coach, every time you help a teacher move at least one level in a domain, whatever that domain may be, in at least one school year, you're going to dramatically increase student outcomes. And so you can really help all your teachers become master teachers. But first, you have to understand what skill and will is and how those kind of interplay. So again, for me, this is just a really hopeful perspective on teaching and on coaching, because it's not saying that you have to be prepared to provide the everything for everybody at the same time, because that's pretty close to being impossible. But it is saying you can help every teacher in one way. And if we keep helping every teacher master something each year, then they are going to become masterful teachers over time. And that's something that you can sustain, helping each teacher become more masterful in one way. So, this is what the will and skill matrix looks like. It's not especially complex. I do want to clarify some vocabulary. So when Robyn Jackson is talking about will, the will is the teacher's passion. This is the art of teaching. This is what drives the teacher to help all students be successful. So that teacher wants it. The teacher wants to be the best that he or she can be. The teacher wants to see all of the students be successful. The teacher is passionate about his or her craft. So that's will. When we're thinking about skill, skill is the science of teaching. It's the teacher's pedagogical and content knowledge, how well a teacher knows the subject and how well they can help the students learn it. Okay, so we've got the will and we've got the skill. Now, master teachers, they know their craft and they have the drive and determination to be the very best at it. So those master teachers, when we look at the will skill matrix, those master teachers are what we would consider to be high skill and high will. They have that pedagogical background, so they know what to teach and how to teach it, but they're also passionate about their craft and finding ways to reach all of the students. Then at the opposite end of this matrix, we have our low skill and our low will teachers. So they're not coming with passion and they're not coming with the pedagogical skills. And then we have ours that are kind of in the middle. We have some who are high will, they want it, they just don't really have the skills yet. And then we have some that have skills. They know teaching and learning, but they're just not very passionate about it right now. Now, something to keep in mind, because we are going to be kind of categorizing teachers as we go through this, and obviously some of the quadrants seem much more positive than other quadrants. But what we need to remember is that no teacher is in one quadrant all the time, and that teachers can move from quadrant to quadrant based on new initiatives, based on things going on in their personal lives. And so we know that a situation could take a high skill, high will teacher and very quickly move them to, they still have their skill set, but now they don't have that passion. Something's happened to compromise their passion. Or likewise, we can take a high skill, high will teacher, and that may be a veteran teacher with many, many years of experience. And then we transform teaching into a digital process. And all of a sudden, they don't feel quite as competent in their skill set in this digital world. And so that can move them maybe temporarily into another quadrant. So we do need to understand that these quadrants can be fluid. It's not a permanent label for any teacher. So let's check in the chat. Here are a couple of questions for you. What are some conditions or situations that may cause a teacher to be low skill? And what are some conditions or situations that may cause a teacher to be low will? If you have a situation that you just don't really feel like typing out and you would prefer to unmute and share, please feel free to do so.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm driving, so I'd rather unmute and stuff.
That is fine.
Could it be where a teacher's move grade and teaching like another subject, for instance, because even for this year, well, not for myself, but I know of a third grade teacher who switched to fifth grade. So that's a whole different ballgame for him teaching math now at the fifth grade level. And it's a testing grade. So that would have, in my opinion, changed his quadrant.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. I think that's a fantastic example. And with that example, it could impact a teacher's will and skill. So
Yeah,
if that grade level
right.
change was not their choice, then that could definitely have an
Right.
impact on their will. And then they've got to learn a whole new curriculum, new
Whole new
curricular
curriculum.
resources, new teammates. So absolutely. What a great example. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any other examples of some conditions or situations that might cause a teacher to be either low skill or low will? Sometimes teachers may not feel comfortable asking questions or not know who to turn to for support. Absolutely. Um, I know just as Nadia referenced someone changing grade levels, I went as what I considered to be a fairly masterful teacher to a new school. And they did everything differently. And all of a sudden, like I didn't feel competent anymore. And I never lost my will, but I did feel like my skill was compromised for a while with that move. Absolutely, until I learned who my go-tos were. I'm old enough that that was before we had coaches in buildings. And so I didn't have someone like a coach to turn to. So great examples. All right. So Robyn shares some signs of will problems and some signs of skill problems. I am not thinking that you cannot read these yourself, but I do know that we have some folks driving, so I'll read them as well. So she says that here are some signs or some symptoms of teachers who may be low in will. Cynicism, lack of ownership, detachment, foot dragging, pushback, half hearted improvements, resentment, maybe even sabotage, fear, competing agendas, denial, commitment to status quo, no accountability, distractions, corner cutting, and a lack of reflection. So, those are symptoms of will problems. If we look at signs of skill problems, they might include confusion, feeling overwhelmed, false starts, wrong work, wrong time, overwork and redos, inconsistency, fear, poor communication, good ideas go nowhere, being confused by data, changing for change's sake, getting stuck, missing deadlines, disorganization, or even failure. So, those are just some symptoms of teachers who may be struggling with either will or skill. And so, you can maybe refer back to this list as we get to some of the application in just a little bit. Now, I know you are not all of the same age and era as me, but you may have heard that at one time there was a game show called The Price is Right. And on that game show, there was a game that they would play called the high low game. So we are going to play the high low game. There's no prizes. Sorry, just pride. This is being recorded so everyone will know. But yeah, that's all you get. So I am going to present you with 4 different scenarios, and you need to decide whether each scenario represents a high will, low skill teacher, or a low will, low skill, or a high will, high skill, or a low will, high skill. Okay, so there's 4 scenarios. There should be one example of each. Now, we're going to use a waterfall sharing approach for this, which means that I'm going to read the scenario. You're going to think to yourself what type of teacher you think this is, what quadrant it represents. You can type it in the chat, but don't send it until I say go so that we can give everybody an opportunity to think through it. And then I'll say go and you'll all send your response at the same time. Okay. Now, also know that we can have some discussions in some of these scenarios. So they're not necessarily cut and dry with an absolutely obvious answer. There is room for discussion with them. Okay. All right. Here we go. Here's the first one. And I was hungry when I wrote these scenarios. So Miss Chili's has been teaching for 12 years. She adjusted rapidly to emergency remote teaching, developing new routines and procedures for her students and their caregivers that were used as models across the district. She understands the challenges her school is facing this year to do more with less, fill staff shortages, and support teachers who are new to the profession. She covers classes during her planning without complaint, and she develops and shares instructional plans with an extended team of teachers. She serves on SIT and on the MTSS team. She also works with a team of teachers from across the state to write innovative lesson plans that all North Carolina teachers will be able to access. So where is Miss Chili's on the will and skill matrix? Here are your choices. Type it in the chat, but don't send it quite yet. Okay, on your mark, get set, send. All right, I see high will, high skill. I would agree. I would agree. She's showing that she is a high skilled teacher. She's being called upon to support teachers all across the state in lesson planning. She supports teachers at her own school. She serves on some leadership teams. So I would say that they have recognized her skill as a teacher. And also the fact that she does things like covering classes during her planning without ever complaining about it. I think that component really speaks to her will. So really nice job. All right, here's the next one. Everyone in the school has seen Mr. Berger's app that counts exactly how many days, minutes, and seconds are left before he's eligible to retire. Although he shares it jokingly, it is clear that the countdown is for real. Mr. Berger is a popular staff member, the guy who always has a story to make you laugh at life. He will often use his humor to kick off a team planning meeting, but generally stays quiet during the actual instructional planning discussion. If specifically addressed in a meeting, he will wave off the question with a dismissive, "You know I don't use all of that fancy stuff." Unfortunately, that's true. Mr. Berger's classroom is traditional sit and get, and student performance leaves a lot to be desired. So think to yourself, where's Mr. Berger on the will and skill matrix? And how do you know? Don't send it yet, just think. All right, send or unmute, either way. Yeah. Mr. Berger could probably be classified as low will, low skill. He's a great guy. You want to be around Mr. Berger. But if we're looking at what's actually happening in his classroom, he's not demonstrating high skill. And then he's really kind of motivated by retirement at this point. So he doesn't have the passion that he may have once had at some point in his career. So I think he would be a good example of low will, low skill. All right, third example. Mr. Appleby was a great find on the recruiting trip last spring. He was eager to relocate to Digital Learning County, and his positive attitude and excitement about having his own classroom was infectious. Mr. Appleby clearly bought out Amazon with all possible motivational posters and dipped into his own pockets to add unique chairs, beanbags, lamps, etc. to make the classroom cool and cozy. As a beginning teacher, Mr. Appleby cheerfully attends all required PD sessions and will bring the ideas that are shared with his team planning meetings to offer them to his colleagues. His teammates will often say something like, "Oh, that looks fun. Maybe we can keep it in mind when we teach X standard." Mr. Appleby is aware that his students are not being as successful as students in other classrooms, so he continues to try new ideas and hope for the best. So feel free to either add in chat or unmute. Where do you think Mr. Appleby is? Sure. High will, low skill. He wants to be the absolute best teacher he can be, and he's just not there yet. Okay. And actually, it's the Mr. Applebee's that I really love coaching. They have that will, they're so excited about it, and they want to learn new strategies to better serve their students. So for me, I would really like to work with Mr. Appleby. All right, last example. The last 2 years have been tough on Miss Duncan. After experiencing success throughout her career, shifts in expectations to include more online resources really threw her for a loop. She struggled to adapt her tried and true strategies to work on digital platforms. She continues to share her old ideas at team planning meetings, touting their success. These ideas are very well aligned to the content standards, so her teammates like aspects of them, but Ms. Duncan gets easily offended when they suggest ways to update her strategies. She's quick to point out all the reasons why the new ideas will fail. Although not her intention, she's beginning to isolate herself as her younger colleagues find it easier to avoid her than to engage in never-ending debates. So where do you think Ms. Duncan is? This one's a little trickier, huh? So if we look at patterns, we see we've already had a high will, high skill, a low will, low skill, a high will, low skill. And so we would predict that Miss Duncan would be a low will and a high skill. And I think to some extent that is true. Um, but at the same time, I think that while Miss Duncan does have obvious skill, knowledge of the standards, lots of years of experience and strategies that she knows, her skill in terms of maybe some digital teaching and learning pedagogies or some more current research-based approaches, she doesn't really have skills in those areas. And so she does need to grow skills some in that area. And while she's having behaviors that maybe show she is low will, that low will may also be coming with that feeling of being less competent in terms of skills. So if we can update her skills a little bit, then that also might improve her will. So Miss Duncan's a little bit of a tricky one, and she doesn't fall as neatly into one of the quadrants. And I think you'll find that with some of your teachers. All right. So good news. There's a way to coach each of these quadrants. So, and this is all coming from Robyn Jackson's work. So these are not ideas that Jen Graham came up with. So let's take a look at the high will, high skill teachers. Ms. Jackson said that these are the most neglected teachers. They are the most overworked teachers, and they need more and better feedback. And you can kind of see that In many schools, we don't have a ton of high will, high skilled teachers right now. And so they are left to be the ones who mentor all the teachers and have the student teachers, and they're on all the committees and they're leading planning meetings. They just have so much going on right now. And then as a coach, if you have all of these other new to the profession teachers, you're probably not able to allocate as much of your time to grow these high will, high skilled teachers. So they still have areas in which to grow, but they're going to need really specific feedback on that. So these teachers have been strong and competent. Your feedback can provide them with a fresh perspective on their practice, positioning them to find new ways to grow. So sometimes you can just be the inspiration for them trying something new. Use a one thing feedback approach. Draw their attention to the root cause of their effectiveness so they can expand or apply that one thing to other areas of their practice and become even more effective. That's something that has been shown that often teachers who are high will, high skill teachers cannot articulate why their practices are successful. And so a way to help them grow is to help them think through and be able to articulate why a particular strategy is as impactful as it is, and to help them think about how they can take that successful strategy and either apply it to other areas or explain it to other teachers. And so that is a way that we can coach our high will, high skilled teachers. Now, when we have high will, low skill teachers, Robyn says that they are going to buy into your vision, your mission, and your values, but they lack the skill to achieve your purpose in their classroom. If there's no intervention, they can become frustrated and slip to low will, low skill, and they need your surefire support. So these teachers need very targeted, specific support where it's most needed, and they need the results of the support tracked over time. They need to be able to actually see that they are progressing along the way, that they're making progress. That is very encouraging for them. And so their surefire support needs to be differentiated, developmental, and deliberate. And we'll talk about those three words in just a few minutes. If you're not familiar with the text, Get Better Faster, that is a great one to pair with coaching this group of teachers, because Get Better Faster actually has like a scope and sequence of a logical order of teaching skills, and you can kind of go like see where that teacher is, see what the next attainable skill is, and have that be their targeted support area. So that's a recommendation I would make. When we look at our low will, low skill teachers, these teachers are ineffective in the classroom, and sometimes it seems like they don't really care. They can't change their will or skill without changing their situation. And so they need purposeful, universal accountability, which means not just you holding them accountable, but that whole community of educators. So leaders or builders of these teachers need to consider the question, how do I create an environment where everyone can perform at their very best? The accountability needs to align to the school purpose. It has to be very simple, and it must be enforced consistently. And then finally, when we think about coaching our low will, high skill teachers, these teachers are effective in the classroom. They may use traditional leadership practices can actually increase their resistance. So they don't want to be talked at. They don't want to sit through professional development that they have already mastered those skills. So that's something to kind of keep in mind for these teachers. And they need a positive school culture. So, culture is a collection of organizational habits and the stories we tell about them. I love her definition for school culture in that way. Organizational habits, these are what we do every day to meet our goals for students. And stories are the narratives we tell ourselves and others about the work that we do. So when you put those two things together, they shape and maintain the school culture. They create the norms and the unwritten expectations by which everyone abides. So the easier you make the right behaviors and the tougher you make the wrong behaviors, the harder it's going to be for those teachers to continue to act outside of whatever the norm culture is. These are teachers that we really want to work on because, unfortunately, a less than perfect school culture can spread. It's contagious. And so we really do want to get these teachers to increase their will before they start kind of pulling some other teachers down with them. So also in the book, she says, if we really want to improve teacher skill, we need to provide practice that is differentiated, deliberate, and developmental. So by differentiated, she said, it's important to use data points to determine the level of skill, not a hunch. And so I think we're getting better about doing this with students, really looking for the evidence of why a learner is in a particular category. And the same needs to be true for our teachers. Because we know that the teachers can move on the continuum for different skill levels and in different areas. So we really can't just lump a teacher in one category and they always are going to stay in that quadrant. If we're talking about a different content area or a different context, they may be in a different quadrant. And so we really have to look at the evidence for that. So as we look at differentiating our coaching support, here are some examples of how you can differentiate support for different levels of teachers. So novice teachers, they need exposure. They need explanations. They need very direct instruction on good teaching practices. Our developing teachers need to focus on standards and aligning practices that they may know to desired outcomes. Proficient teachers need to focus on consistency and automaticity in their effective practices, and accomplished teachers need to be prompted to reflect on why those practices work. Now, Robyn also says we need to be deliberate in our coaching actions. And so when she talks about being deliberate, she means identifying specific elements of instruction that need improvement and helping the teachers focus on this. And I think this next bullet point is so very, very important. I should have put like a big red box around it. Teachers need time and opportunities to practice again and again until these are automatic. So we can't just tell a teacher they need to do something and then go in and right away determine, well, they either did it or they didn't. So I'm going to make a judgment about that. They need to have lots of opportunities to practice this with feedback so they can continue to improve in that particular area. And sometimes I don't know that we give teachers enough opportunity to practice without judgment. And then finally, she says that our coaching needs to be developmental. So to grow teachers, you have to stretch them just beyond their current level. If you try to stretch them too much, they're going to be frustrated. If you try to not stretch them enough, then they're either going to be bored or they're just not going to put any effort in whatsoever. So teachers should always be encouraged to be focusing on the next step and not the final destination. So again, thinking of the kind of that get better, faster scope and sequence, what is the next step that teacher can master? So for our will and skill task, grab something around you, some kind of scrap paper, something that you can kind of scribble on. If you are more of a document person, then just pull up a blank doc that you can type on. But I want you to think of that either piece of paper or that document in 4 sections. And of course, those sections are going to be labeled as each of the quadrants. So high will, low skill, high will, high skill, low skill, and low will, high skill. So I'll give you a second to do that. Now, we are most definitely not going to be sharing this with anybody, but I want you to start writing the names of the teachers with whom you work and start thinking about which teacher belongs in which quadrant. And again, you're not necessarily going to have data in front of you right now where you can really be looking at some clear evidence, but just in your mind, start thinking, I think this person is high will, high skill. I think this person is low will, low skill. So take a minute and jot down the names of teachers in the various quadrants. And don't ever share this with anyone. And then for step 3, I want you to take a look at the list that you've created and think about in which quadrant have you placed the greatest number of teachers? And I want you to focus in on that particular quadrant. So in whichever quadrant you have placed the greatest number of teachers, that's what I want you to focus on for step 4. So for step 4, I want you to think about how you will use the information that we've talked about in this session to create a coaching plan for this quadrant of teachers in your school. And then I'd love for you to consider sharing your thoughts. So I'm going to give you some think time for a couple of minutes, and then we'll see if anybody's willing to share. started babbling without unmuting my mic. Would anyone like to share something they're thinking about for the teachers of that particular quadrant in their work? You can either put it in the chat or unmute, whichever you're comfortable with. I see Suzanne is typing. Oh, I love that idea. Teachers rating themselves so that they can build each other and see their own strengths and weaknesses. Oh, I absolutely love that idea. What a great one. Wouldn't that be neat if they did that and then they took the initiative and approached the coach and were like, you know what, I've really done some thinking and I really would like to grow in this area. Can you help me with that? I think that would be powerful. What a great idea. See more bubbles, so I'm practicing wait time. Absolutely. She said this requires transparency with self, and not everyone wants to do it, but it's the best thing to do to move forward and grow. Absolutely true. Thank you so much for sharing. So our time together has come to an end. Thank you so much for joining us today for this NC Coaching Collaborative webinar. Our next Coaching Collaborative webinar will be on December 2nd. We will have the Marcia Sirkin with us, and she will be providing a session called Workshops and Wizards, all the good feels parts of coaching. So that is a great one to hear in December where everyone's feeling a little frantic. Always know that you can find our collaborative collection within the DTL Eventbrite site. And so I've got that linked there. I don't believe registration is open yet for Marcia's webinar on December 2nd. That will probably be up in the next few days. Also, we would love it if you could provide some feedback for this session. That helps us get better. It definitely helps me grow. So you're being my coaches now. And so the link to the feedback is in the chat. I'm going to stop recording and then I will stay on if anyone has any questions or anything they would like to share.